Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MBV podcast. I'm Jeremy Gardner, and this podcast is hosted by mindbodyvortex.com. So, on this series, we go deep into the mind body connection, the mysteries of the mind, the sciences of the body, so that we can better understand who we are as human beings, why we do what we do, how we operate, and developing a better understanding so that we can live a life fueled with more passion, more meaning, more purpose, just more excitement, fun, and happiness. So, this is why I am super excited about our guest today. Dr. Rachel Carlton Abrams is a holistic medical practitioner and physician. She is also the owner of the Santa Cruz Integrative Medical Clinic, an award-winning clinic in Santa Cruz, California. And the reason I am really excited and really quite honored to have her on our podcast today is because the message she comes with is a meaningful one. It has such a direct impact for all of us as individuals and as a community and as a world. So she really embodies the integrative holistic health message, where she brings Eastern philosophies to the modern approach in traditional medicine in a way that touches on all of the important aspects of the human experience, if you will. So it is her latest book that caught my attention, one of many that she has written over the years. And this book in particular is a very fascinating concept, body-wise, which is based on the concept that as human beings, we are meant to be deeply intuitive with our surroundings, within our lives, but more importantly, and more specifically, within ourselves and our body. So this is referred to as body intelligence. And Rachel has written this book at such an important time where as people, we are in need of this exciting message. We're looking for more purpose and meaning, and it's tough out there. So it starts with ourselves. This book is a deep exploration. It's a guide. It's a toolbox for getting in touch with ourselves and listening to our body. And the reason why Rachel has decided to write this book is because she believes that this is a power, almost a superhuman ability that we have, but we've lost over time, over the last few thousand years, over our evolutionary path as human beings and what we have become today. And she believes that not only is it deep within us, but it is something that we can learn how to regain contact with in a way that can help us benefit our lives and help us become more healthy, more passionate, more compassionate as people. And it's just such an amazing concept, right? So I am really looking forward to this conversation. This is such an exciting presentation of the mind-body connection, and I look forward to being able to share this conversation with you. So let's go. Rachel, it's such a pleasure being able to talk to you. Thanks so much for connecting with us today. And
Really my pleasure.
it's awesome. So you come, the reason I'm so excited to talk to you today is because you come with such an exciting message in helping us understand more about who we are as people, helping us bring wisdom into the way we live as human beings. And a lot of your work and writing you've done over the years seem to be focused towards not only living a healthy life, but also creating a life that we can love and a life that we can be excited about and feel good about. So your latest work is what caught my attention personally, and I have a feeling that this seems like a personal piece of work for you, and it's coming at such an interesting time. And so, from what I understand, from what I've learned from you, is that this is something that we all have, right? And
Absolutely.
for some reason, we've seemed to have lost touch with this connection over the last while. So what's going on there? What is this? Where is this coming from? And why did you decide to do this book?
That's a great question. And, I really think that if you talk to anybody who's excited about their work, they're generally working on something that matters deeply to them. And we're generally doing that because we need to work on it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm someone who has had a really blessed and wonderful life, but full of all kinds of challenges, including having small children while doing medical training and residency and young family life. And medical training, as bizarrely as it sounds, is the opposite of becoming body intelligent, right? So you're learning about bodies all the time, but what you're being taught about your own body is that you should ignore it always, pretty much. If you need to pee, too bad. If you need to sleep, too bad. Medical training is all about ignoring your body's needs in order to serve as a physician. And it's not great training for being healthy well the rest of your life. And I would say that modern medicine really mirrors our culture in many ways, which has this bizarrely mistaken perception, as opposed to the East, by the way. So when I say our culture, I really mean United States and Northern Europe to some degree, Western culture. But we have this mistaken perception that our mind and soul and our body are separate things. Mm-hmm. And that goes back, hundreds and hundreds of years to Descartes and slightly before that. But it's really damaging for us, because this idea that somehow I can function as this person from the neck up, and that this thing that dangles down below my neck is irrelevant to my intelligence or my efficacy or my work in the world is extremely unfortunate. And what you end up with is a lot of really unhappy, unhealthy people, even people who are doing great good in the world. So my medical training, again, not helpful. And I had my own journey about really learning to listen to my body. And this book is targeted at women, but totally relevant to men and women. Mm-hmm. I targeted it at women in particular because women are often pressured to be basically, doing their job, if they're working, serving their family, taking care of everybody else, ignoring their own needs. And, the women who walk into my office tend to be exhausted, fatigued, low sex drive, anxious, allergy and autoimmune disease, chronic pain of some sort, so much so that I actually call that in the book chronic body fatigue. And I see it over and over again, chronic body depletion, because we're taking what is our essential, beautiful energy. It's really an Eastern concept, right? Our chi or our prana, and we're spending it all day long. And we're not reaping it back from either nature or exercise or self-care or listening to ourselves. So developing body intelligence for men and women is about learning the language of the body. What is my body trying to tell me? And I'll tell you, as a doctor, my observation is that when the body is first talking to you, it kind of, it sort of taps on you, right? And then if you're not listening and you're ignoring it, yeah, whatever, I'm busy, then it's going to shove you a little bit. And then if you're still not listening, it's going to whop you upside the head, right? And that's when I see people when they're having their health crises, because they haven't been listening for a long time. And they're either having pain or dysfunction or some kind of discomfort.
And that's when they come see you, right? When things get to that point where maybe,
right, exactly.
Maybe there's something going
exactly.
wrong, but so when you mentioned that your training had a lot to do with ignoring your body, but I think you use the word stoic in the book, which is a very good term to use, because a lot of us have become kind of disconnected from that, from listening to our body. It's almost a foreign concept, which is why it's so exciting. But we are, as humans, we're meant to be body intuitive, right? Like thousands of years ago, we weren't just paying attention to our surroundings and very in tune with our environment, but we were also very in touch with our bodies. So where has that connection gone for us as human beings? Why have we become so disconnected from it?
Right. It's a great question. And what you say is really true. I often talk about the Hawaiian navigators. Have you ever heard of these folks? So the ancient Polynesian navigators are from ancient Polynesia, so a long time ago. And they actually can navigate by reading the stars in the sky and navigating by those, which is amazing in and of itself, but also their deep intuition. So I got to hang out with a gentleman who is one of the teachers now in that tradition in Hawaii. And I met him in Cape Town, South Africa, when he had sailed from Hawaii to Cape Town, South Africa, through the Straits of Gibraltar, one of the most dangerous wave areas in the world, on this tiny little boat that they build out of natural materials in the Hawaiian Islands, and navigating by the stars and their deep intuition. And he told me this story about his teacher. And if you think about this, there are stories like this in every tradition, right? In Africa, it's tracking animals, or in the Americas, it's hunting animals, or knowing what plants to use. But in this case, his teacher was being taught by his grandfather, and his grandfather was, as a baby, setting him around the island so he could observe how the waves came in, and he could see how the breezes were working in that area. And that baby learned to really feel the ocean. And by the time he was 5, he had him on the boat sailing with him. And he said to him, "Hey, I'm feeling sick. I'm feeling nauseous." And the grandfather brought him over and tied his hands together and threw him off the back of the boat and said, "The problem is you feel like you're on top of the wave, that you're separate from it. You need to be the wave.
Mm.
And when you know you're the wave, you won't be sick anymore. And not only that, you'll know how to get to where you want to go. So what they say is when you're navigating, you envision the island that you're going to, and you allow the island to pull you toward it. And you watch the waves as they come to you so you can see whether they come off that island. And Nainoa, who I was speaking with, tells me the story about getting stuck in the doldrums where there wasn't any winds. Mm-hmm. And he didn't know where to go. And he was absolutely terrified because he had his first crew on his boat. This is in the 80s. And he was standing at the railing with his hands gripping it, cold and so bone tired that finally his mind stopped talking to him. Wow. And the fear. And all of a sudden he let go into his intuition, and he turned his head, and the moon just shone through the clouds for just a moment. But prior to that, he'd been unable to see it because of the clouds. And as it shone through on his shoulder, he looked up and he suddenly knew where to go. Wow. Right? So navigating in life is like ancient Polynesian navigating. We have to pay attention to our natural surroundings, but we have to listen deeply to what's within us and feel ourselves as a part of our environment. Right? Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of lies we're talking about here that are damaging. One is that the mind and the body and the soul are separate. Clearly not true. And the other is that you're really separate from the earth around you in the natural world. Also not true, right? We are the natural world. So the more that we can actually get embodied in that way and listen to our own deep wisdom and the way that wisdom is connected with the earth around us, the better people do. So when those people come to me, with those medical problems, the first thing I try to help them do is to listen to their body, because, I do all kinds of fancy tests in my office. I'm an integrative physician. I do deep nutritional testing and functional medicine, all kinds of stuff. And I like that because I'm a geek and I'm a scientist. But I will say the most important thing in the room, the most important diagnostic test in the room is the human being in front of me and whether he or she can listen deeply to themselves about what's happening. And if I'm a good enough listener and help them tell their own story, we can usually solve what the problem is.
Yeah, and that's the really interesting part about it is you have so many of these case studies where you kind of help. You say that a lot of us know what the problems are intuitively because actually naturally we are very good at listening to our bodies. We've kind of just tuned out. So you're able to help us investigate and kind of interpret the language in a way that we can understand and apply to our lives, and then make things a little bit more obvious for ourselves. And you obviously this is something that you've gotten very good at, and by working with so many people. But what you're doing now is kind of teaching us how to tune back into that in a way that we can navigate not only our health but the circumstances that we face in life, which is amazing. And so when people come to see you with the kind of the problem where things kind of get to a point where they think they need help, are they usually surprised at what the problems actually are that you're able to help them navigate and find and discern?
Well, I'm going to say yes, just because the way I work and most integrative physicians work is just really different. In that there's really no one who's going to walk into my office with whom I'm not going to talk about their food, what I call the fundamental in the Body Wise book, what I call the 5 fundamentals of health, what they eat, their sleep in detail, their activity in detail, how they move, their love and relationships, and whether they feel like a sense of purpose in the world. Because in my opinion, and really it's not just me, I mean, many physicians would agree, those are the fundamentals of well-being. And without those, we can't heal anything. And then, we might do some testing, and I actually give in the book a tremendous amount of science behind all of these symptoms that people can actually take a look at or have their physician look at, that helps them come up with what the issue is. Some common things that I find that are surprising, besides I'll give a good story with the body talking to us. But, a lot of people are vitamin deficient in one way or another, and it just hasn't been diagnosed. And when it is, it's incredible how much better they feel. Yeah. And a lot of these things are not rocket science. You just have to look deeply at it, or it's a hormonal imbalance. So those things are important to diagnose. And again, I give direction on how to do that. But the most surprising thing, I think, for most people is that often the body is talking to them about a life change.
Yeah.
So I have lots of patients who are ill, and when we really get down to it, they're ill because of the choices they're making in their work, in their relationships. In the book, I tell the story of this woman who is this lovely person who came to see me, and she was having abdominal pain. And she had already seen another physician, a regular doc, who had accurately diagnosed her with gallbladder disease and said, you need to have your gallbladder out. And she came to see me because she didn't want to have her gallbladder out. She wondered if there were alternatives. So we started talking about it, and I got a sense of when she got the pain, and the pain sounded very much like gallbladder pain. But as we got into a little more detail, she realized she only had the pain after speaking with her mother on the phone. So the issue for her was not just gallbladder disease. It was that physiologically, but it was also this relationship with her mother, which was so challenged and difficult for her. And that mom had been abusive and neglectful for her as a child, and it was still hard for her to connect with her as an adult. So, our prescription was, don't eat a lot of fatty food just in case it's gallstones, and don't talk to your mom.
Good place to start.
And I saw her 3 months later, and she had no pain at all. So it's amazing how, even little things, and eventually we helped her set better boundaries so she could continue to have a relationship with her mom. But how these little things can make what seemingly little things can make a big difference. But when she really listened to her body about her life and made the changes so that she could find a life that her body loved, she did much better.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's because it may sound simple when you get to the bottom of it and making the connection, but for some reason, we don't think like that. We're looking for solutions in an external way. We want to add things to our life. Like we want to take a pill. Yeah. We want pills. We want that perfect diet. We want that perfect exercise that's going to release my stress. But sometimes, as you mentioned, it's not adding things, but taking things away from our lives, or making just a simple change, which maybe we're avoiding those things because, if it has to do with a relationship or your work situation, might be a simple thing to identify, but they're not always easy things to change, right?
Exactly. Super challenging most of the time.
Mm-hmm. So, but if there's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, like if you can identify how this is going to benefit me, it's going to make me feel better, then it might be easier to make those changes, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I would say in the case of this woman, and this is always the case in the body healing itself, which is that you heal one area and it heals another area too, right? The side effects of doing medicine this way are generally good side effects, right?
Yeah.
So in addition to setting better boundaries with her mom and not having belly pain, she was happier, right? She became a more developed soul. She had a whole nother layer of growth around the abuse that she'd suffered, which transferred to the rest of her life as well, all her other relationships and her work. And that is my experience of really looking deeply into the body and listening. And again, I wrote this book because I had to learn this lesson, right? I'm someone who, all along the road of my life and my medical training, the body would talk, and sometimes I would listen, sometimes I wouldn't. And when I didn't, it never went well. It didn't go well. And I had to leave my medical practice because of getting headaches. And I tell the story in the book too. I love being a doctor, and I even liked being a regular doctor, but it was kind of exhausting trying to take care of people in the way I'm talking about, where I can really find out what the source of the problem is rather than just the symptoms. And it hurt my heart all day long to see people for 10 to 15 minutes and have to cut them off when they were having deep conversations about what might be wrong with them. And I eventually started having headaches only at work. Like I never had them when I wasn't at work. And it took several people to help me, but eventually I figured out that's because my body didn't want to be working there anymore. Mm-hmm. And when I quit, even though I had to continue working for 6 months because of my contract, my headaches went away. That was a signal. That was my body talking to me. And, it makes sense that, my other books are about Taoism, which is an entirely different way of thinking about health in the body. Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine are all whole systems, right? That look at the body They have an exercise tradition and a nutrition tradition and a spiritual tradition and a medical tradition and a sexual tradition, all one, right? Whereas Western medicine is this bizarre healing tradition, unlike those great traditions or some of the native medicine traditions. It's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I love Western medicine. I use it all the time, but it's kind of got its arm cut off, right? It's this isolated scientific thing divorced from lifestyle, nutrition, love and relationships, sexuality, all these other pieces of being human that are so vital. And I think that both my training as an integrative doctor and then my early explorations into Chinese medicine and Taoism and Qigong and Tai Chi, and it all deeply influences what I do.
So that was earlier on.
It makes what I do more holistic, right? More like those traditions.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That was earlier on in your exploration where you were starting to incorporate those Eastern methods and exploring different philosophies, but you got your start in traditional medicine, right? And that's kind of
absolutely.
Yeah. So take us just a little bit through that path. How did that transition into what you've been doing over recently, or later on in your career in terms of integrative medicine? How did that transition happen naturally for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm someone who literally wanted to do mind-body medicine from the time I wrote I've got children going to college this year.
Wow.
And we were talking about college essays, and I actually wrote my college essay on wanting to do mind-body medicine.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been in me a long time. My father's a pastor. I've always been a very spiritual person. I've always been a very intellectually interested person. And my father is also a biologist and wanted to be a physician. So I really come by a lot of this naturally.
What was the actual essay that you ended up writing?
It was my admissions essay for college.
Oh, okay.
And it was on wanting to really integrate mind, body, and spirit in the work that I do in the world, which amazing. Clearly is still what I'm doing.
You're calling, yeah.
So I did regular medical training because I really wanted to have those tools because I think they're enormously valuable. And again, I still use them every day I'm at work. And I knew that it wasn't going to be enough for me, that it was eventually I was going to need to get more integrated in the medicine that I was doing. So, I started little by little. My husband and I have written 3 books on Taoism and holistic sexuality. And the first one happened when I was still in medical school. And I wrote one on when my son was born, actually. And then I wrote the second one when I was on bed rest with the twins in residency.
In residency.
And then I wrote the third one when all the kids were small, and I was a practicing physician. So, I mean, those have influenced me enormously. Being able to feel and listen to the body, and to be able to feel your vital energy and move it through your body for your own health and wellness, I think is fundamental, and it's really fundamental to almost all traditions, right? Certainly Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, but also most of the native healing traditions. So I feel like I am trying to rebalance Western medicine, to bring in those pieces that are missing to make it really a holistic tradition.
That's amazing. Yeah, it really is it's rare to find someone that has that well-balanced, not only just in certain disciplines, but an understanding of kind of how they can interact with each other and what that can mean for us as individuals and just as a world, right? And the future, because the way that we understand things in Western tradition it doesn't seem too promising for us, right? And as you mentioned earlier, it's reductionist by nature. We're only looking at one specific thing when it's never only one thing. It's a combination, and you're bringing it to us in an exciting way, in a way that resonates with us on the ground level, on the experiences that we have, the way we feel on a daily basis, and starting to make sense of these things and putting the pieces together. And yeah, so just talking about that, just in our daily lives, I want to talk about stress, because this is something that comes up in the book, right? This is obviously something that touches all of us in some way or another. And you mentioned the fundamentals of health, right? Eating, sleeping, moving, loving, and finding purpose. And I have a feeling that stress has an impact on all of these areas, right?
Absolutely.
And
in both directions.
In both directions. Yeah, which is a good point as well. There's a reason why we have stress. And, I'm curious to know, why has it become such an issue today? Is it because of our environment is so different? Our stimulations are so diverse and completely different than why we were designed to do as human beings, or have we always been stressed? Have human beings always been this kind of overridden by these responses?
Well, it's a really good question because, I mean, the people who say, oh, yeah, we're really stressed today and we didn't used to be, like it was some bucolic existence when people lived till 40 and had infectious disease and babies died all the time, is obviously just not accurate, right? So we've never not had stress, right? The way that we experience stress has changed. And I talk a lot about our evolutionary health, meaning our bodies are these just exquisite, really amazing beings, but our physiology was designed for about 10,000 years ago, 5 to 10,000 years ago. And 5 to 10,000 years ago, the way we lived was really different. And in fact, it was not that different until a couple hundred years ago. And in some parts of the planet, it's still that way, right? If you go into the deep South American rainforest or to parts of Africa, people are still living like we lived 5,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And their physiology is very much in tune with that environment. But for us, our body is made to sleep when it's dark, right? To go to sleep when it's dark, to get up when it's light. It's made to be active all day long, because if you weren't active, basically you couldn't survive. You had to get firewood, you had to provide shelter, you had to find food. Our bodies are made to have very few calories, not enough calories, and to eat a variety of foods, mostly fresh foods, and mostly vegetable and fiber matter and some animal protein. And by the way, people who eat that way still all around the world live longer than we do. We're eating, unfortunately, in the developed world, we're eating almost empty calories.
Yeah.
Food that has had fiber removed, vitamins removed, pesticides added, hormones added. I mean, I could go on and on. We have 80,000 new chemicals since 1950.
That's
most
ridiculous.
Of which have not even been tested. And the ones that have been tested have only been tested, by themselves, singly, not as they occur in nature, which is all together. And then we live in this world where we're overstimulated all the time. So one thing that I think is true is people definitely had stress, right? Back in the day. And I'm talking somewhere between 200 and 20,000 years ago. There was definitely stress, right? People had, struggled to survive. But stresses came typically, all at once, like, oh, the lion is now loose in the village, right? That is a big stress. You should have a stress response. But once the lion is gone, your stress response should return to normal. And then you've got a fairly normal life where you're doing the tasks you usually do. You're related to the people you know. Now we have this world where instead of knowing somewhere between, I think they think people lived in groups of somewhere between 100 and 1,000 people, no more than that. And usually less, usually closer to 150. And in that case, you could really know everybody. And so you knew the tragedies and the accomplishments and celebrations of a smaller number of people. And we're now exposed to people all over the globe all the time. Now, I don't think that's bad. I just think it's a fact. And then, instead of life being primarily lived in nature, we've got screens, just like the one you're looking at right now. Yep. We've got, texting and Twitter, and we've got this constant onslaught of visual and auditory input. And that is very new. And what I think is that our nervous system, we're used to having big stresses and then a down curve in our stress, and I call adrenal downtime, right? Recovery time. Yeah. And what we get right now is stress and then this kind of ongoing stress on a daily basis. And many of us don't even recognize it as such. You have to get away from your life for a good 3 weeks before you actually settle into what is a normal, natural baseline for most people. Wow. And I don't think technology is evil. I love technology. I love that you and I can do this, so far from each other. But we got to be smart about how we do it. We got to be body intelligent about how we use our technology. And that includes, filtering what you expose yourself to and noting how you feel before you watch the evening news and maybe decide not to do it tonight. And being careful about, what's in your bedroom, how many lights and, beeping things. Do you have your phone next to your bed, which is going to make your mind busy all night and you're going to have trouble sleeping? We have to think about what we're made for and we have to make choices that allow us to adapt so that we can thrive. And I think that's possible.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, because it's almost like we're still learning how to adjust. Things are moving so fast, but the human mind doesn't evolve as much as all of these things around us are. So I think that's why you're coming at such your message is so important right now, and just reminding us of who we are naturally and paying more attention to it. Because when I think about body intelligence, the reason why I was able to gain so much from the book is because I think men actually have a lot of work to do in that area. We're almost conditioned not to be sensitive to the way we feel, right?
Yes.
And when I think about body intelligence, I don't think that we're less intelligent. I just think that it doesn't even exist anymore. It's something that we've completely lost a connection with. Not as men, but just in general,
Yeah.
right?
As humans.
As human beings, yeah, okay, and for sure. So learning how to, and the way of, especially now, we're talking about stress, and we're talking about overstimulation, and we're talking about just the complications of our socially driven life can lead to traumas, and lead to more reasons for us to decrease what we are feeling from our bodies. So that's what I want to talk about, is kind of, not only have we lost contact with our body, but it's a way for our bodies to protect us, is to stop is to decrease the input. So that I found that a very fascinating point, is that how do you not only getting back in touch with it, but it's a survival. It has become a survival mechanism where it's completely cut off.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wouldn't say this is 100% true, but 99.9% of the time, the body doesn't do anything that's stupid, right? There are no body parts that are irrelevant, and there's no body reaction that's just evil, right? They all have their purpose. And in this case, we're talking about what's the body's reaction to trauma. When there's a child who is being physically abused by their adult caretaker, they're going to, because it is emotionally painful and it is physically painful, that child is going to go into a defense reaction, which is going to turn down the volume of their ability to sense sensations in their body. And that's very important because it allows them to actually survive it, right? They numb themselves in order to get through it. And the problem is that trauma is unfortunately all too common, and many people stay numb. And I think men in particular, boys in particular, have it really beat into them that you should toughen up, you should suck it up, you should be a man. In other words, you should not feel pain when you feel pain. You should ignore it and keep going anyway, right? This is why I have football players in my office who can barely walk at 40 because of all their injuries throughout their life, because they kept functioning that way. And it's a huge problem, because once you've stopped feeling, first of all, you lose all sensation. So there's no, I'm going to turn down pain and keep pleasure going. You don't get that option, right? Once you turn down pain, you lose pleasure too. And it's incredibly sad, actually. And I work with a lot of women who have had trauma in my office, in whom I'm trying to help them listen to their bodies. And this may seem obvious to some of you, that, gosh, I can feel when I'm hungry, or I can feel when I need to pee, or I can feel when my back hurts in a certain way because of something I did, that is simple. But for some people, it's truly not. They don't sense those things very easily. And the first step is helping people, re-inhabit their bodies and feel their sensations again. And when that happens, especially for someone who has had trauma, it's complicated, because they will feel the pain that they put off, that they numbed themselves to. So when someone opens up to sensation again, it is true that you're going to feel pain, but what I promise you is that you're going to feel pleasure too, all the more so, emotional and physical. And that really, as humans, we deserve to have whole lives where we're awake in our bodies. I mean, I live in Santa Cruz, California, and there are a lot of surfers here. Yeah. And I remember someone saying to me a long time ago, oh my gosh, the only thing the only thing as good as sex is surfing. And I thought, hell, I have to surf, that sounds amazing, right? And I would say that, the human body is infinitely capable of transcendent pleasure. So I'm not separating physical pleasure from spiritual pleasure is maybe not the right word, but a sense of just like wonder and excitement.
Yeah.
And that when you're missing that part of the human register, it's very sad. So getting body intelligent is about reconnecting with your ability to listen to your body, certainly so you can stay well and have direction in your life, but also so you can have ecstasy. I mean, who doesn't want that in this lifetime?
Exactly. And so it's becoming more sensitive so that we can actually have a more enjoyable life, a more exciting life, because we deserve to have every sensation, not just the good, not just the bad, but being in tune with everything, because that's what makes up the experience of life that we're so blessed to have as human beings, right? And
Yes, exactly.
The fact that we can tune decrease that is just, it's amazing that the body can even do that. But what you're saying is that it's as a coping mechanism. Like, our bodies are always trying to look out for us, even if it means blocking us from pain. And what you're doing is you're helping people turn that back up, get back in touch with it, which might be a shock at first, feeling things for the first time in a while, right? And,
right. And and I talk about this quite a bit in Bodywise. But if you're someone who's had trauma, I've got military folks in my practice. I've got certainly people who've suffered childhood abuse. I've had people who've been in, plane crashes. But any kind of trauma has an impact on the body. And what I want to say is that treating that has to be done in a very sensitive and careful way.
Yeah.
And that I do think that delving into it is a good thing. But I don't want anyone to do that if they've had significant trauma, unless they're with someone who really knows what they're doing. Because a skilled trauma therapist, and I've got references to find this in the Bodywise appendix, but a skilled trauma therapist will help you re-inhabit your body, but a small amount at a time, right? So that it's not overwhelming. Otherwise, people can, in recalling that trauma, reliving that trauma, or feeling their body again, and all of a sudden feeling that pain, it can be flooding, it can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And we really want someone safe to be able to hold space so that you can do that in a gradual and careful way, that it's not re-traumatizing.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you need help and guidance, which is what you're there for. And I think you mentioned this as well, is that developing body intelligence means that you can actually get better help. Going into, if I come to see you and I kind of already know what's going on, I just kind of need help to put things together, you'll probably get a better result. It's like you're working together to do some investigation. And then as you give us so many tools to develop our own language and so much information that we can map out. And it's kind of fun because it takes practice, right? You start getting better. It's something that we get better at, listening to our body. Yeah, it's very exciting. Super cool. And so I want to talk about moving up into the mental part, because we know that it's like listening to the body, but now we have our minds still to deal with as well. So, and what might separate us from our primitive past, where we might have been more in touch with our immediate surroundings and the sensations of the moment, including our bodies, is that now we have developed the ability to imagine and conceptualize alternate versions of reality, which is amazing. But oftentimes have nothing to do with the present moment. And we trick ourselves into thinking that these are things that are way more important, right, than what might really be going on in our lives. So how do we now, especially with all the stimulation as we were talking about, how do we decipher what we should be paying attention to when we have other things begging for our attention today?
Yeah. Well, it's a really great question. And you will find that I really think in all areas, whether we're talking about food or we're talking about media, that I think it's important not to be an extremist. I really do. Mm-hmm. And that when people say, oh, I will never, eat that thing ever again, or I will never watch television, or I will, I just think that there is, because the human body is so adaptable and so plastic, and that we shift and change throughout our lifetimes, that there are lots of ways to navigate this, and it's not always going to be the same. And this is what I love about body intelligence, right? That you can actually listen within yourself. So let's say, oh, I don't know, theoretically, someone like Rachel was exhausted and had been working really hard and wanted to just kick back and relax. And perhaps she turned on Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And watched a little Netflix, some lovely, distraction, which, by the way, humans have been doing absolutely forever. Storytelling is basic to our being. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? We're just, instead of telling stories around the campfire, we happen to be watching them on our little portable campfire, which is our computer. So I don't think television, I don't actually have television in my house, but I certainly love watching movies sometimes, or even television shows from time to time. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how do you feel afterward? And how's your life going? Right? So if I decided, hey, my husband's out of town, I'm going to watch Netflix, I'm going to binge watch. So, for 4 hours a day for the next week, I'm going to watch Netflix. And therefore I didn't exercise. And I don't know, I ordered takeout and I made a bunch of decisions that were not good for me. Okay. That is not great, right? My body is not going to like that. That is not a great choice for me. But does that mean I should never do it? No. I can do it, but it's about navigating your life in a way that you get all that you need. And like, maybe I'm such a busy, intellectually engaged person that watching a television show late at night is actually good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's actually adrenal rest time and it makes me sit on my ass for the first time all day. And I really need that.
Exactly.
So, I just think it's important to listen to oneself around. We're basically talking about addictive behaviors, whether it's food, sugar, alcohol, crack, marijuana, binge watching television shows, video games, right? Pornography. These are all potentially addictive because they're fun and they light up our pleasure centers. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of, being easy on ourselves and asking that question. Oh, maybe the fact that I'm really unhappy in my life and I'm drinking 3 glasses of wine a night is not so great. Maybe that's not a great choice for me. Whereas I'm really happy in my life. My friends are all over. I'm going to have a glass of wine every night this week. Maybe that's fine. Yeah. It really depends on why are you doing it? How does it fit into the context of your life? How does your body feel when you do it? Because maybe a glass of wine a night for a week is a terrible idea because you feel awful the next day, right? Very individual. And we've got medical research saying, for example, drinking a glass of wine a night can be healthy, but does that mean it's healthy for you? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Does it mean it's healthy for you this week? I don't know. You got to use your body wisdom to help guide yourself in a way that gets you, maximum learning and fun in your life.
Yeah. And those are huge questions. And that's what those aren't really questions that we tend to ask ourselves is, not only is this the healthy thing to do, but how am I doing? Looking at how does this fit into the big picture? Does this make me feel good? And usually the answers might surprise us. It's like, well, why am I still doing this then? But first of all, I don't think we're conscious enough to be asking those questions. It doesn't come natural for us to wake up and say and look at things in a conscious way, because so much of our behavior is driven unconsciously, right? There's a lot of research that shows how unconscious our lives really are, right? So
yes,
becoming conscious might be the very first step. So is that kind of where you when you're working with your patients, is that typically a starting point, just becoming aware in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And what I think is really important is becoming aware and not judgmental. Wow. In the United States, I'm going to say also probably in Northern Europe, the amount of self-hatred that happens, very damaging. And I think it's hard for people because they think, oh my God, I'm supposed to be vegan and I forgot and I had butter for breakfast on my toast, at the restaurant. Yeah. I'm a terrible person. It's like, we have to be a little kind to ourselves. And that's the other piece of body intelligence and being body wise is I'm not separate from my body. So getting angry at myself for eating butter, right, is not kind, not being kind to myself. So how can I, be aware of what I'm doing? Like maybe as I'm pouring the glass of wine, I go, oh, there I go. I'm pouring the glass of wine again. And that's as far as I get that day, or maybe even the next day. But how can I be gentle and kind with myself in the process of becoming aware of how my decisions affect me?
There we go. Yeah. So just bringing more awareness to our day-to-day behaviors, and it's something that can become strengthened over time. Like you say, it's a good place to start. Just noticing, maybe just noticing what you're doing without maybe not even being at a place where you can intervene or take full control, but at least becoming aware, which is just developing that awareness can lead into to some amazing things and some transformation.
Agreed.
So there's a part in where you talk about the heart. So not only becoming aware consciously, but how much of the heart has to do with our intuition and becoming conscious of that. And there was something that I saw about how we feel with our heart before it reaches our mind. So what does that mean?
It's really cool. So there's research by Heart Math Institute,
Okay.
Which is a really wonderful biofeedback company in Boulder Creek, California, that looks at heart rhythm as a way to predict a level of stress in the body. And they did a study where they had study participants, and on the computer, they had a slideshow of photographs. And those photographs, some of them were very pleasant and some of them were extremely disturbing. And they had monitors on their brain. So they were looking at brain waves. And they also had monitors on their heart rhythm and on their heart impulses in their chest. And what they found was, and I thought this was absolutely fascinating, is that the photos on the computer were randomized. So not even the people doing the testing knew how they would come up. But the body, their hearts actually, before the brain recognized the photo that came up, the heart actually had a pre-impulse to sort of warn the body, to prepare the body before the photo even appeared. Wow. I mean, it's so interesting. Now, you and I know that people do, in fact, have intuitions or preternatural knowledge about things sometimes. It's really downplayed in our culture, but it's just true. Or, the person who knows that something happened to their child or their husband or their best friend across the country, and they feel it, or they wake up from sleep knowing that. Those kinds of things happen all the time. Deep body intelligence, right? It's our deep body intelligence, our deep connection with one another that gives this ability to sort of, make that body time sequence a little different, right? To enter into the land of Einstein, where time is a little bit relative.
Yeah.
And the body is capable of having, impulses before things happen. It's the same if you live in a city and you're walking in what is not a great neighborhood, and it's potentially dangerous, and all your senses are aware and open, and you just have this sense that you shouldn't go, by that alley over there. So you cross the street. This is your body trying to protect you. Mm-hmm. These are those ancient impulses that keep us safe. But they also, they give us sort of superpowers in terms of the world. And what we're talking about, becoming body-wise and body intelligent, people think, oh, that's nice. You can be healthier. You can maybe choose a better doctor. You can know why your back hurts. And what I want to say is that this is what makes people extraordinary. So if you meet someone who is a phenomenal, say, public speaker or coach or CEO, and you see them in person, those people have body intelligence. Because if you get someone who's intellectually brilliant and you marry that with great human intelligence and body intelligence, they become a very powerful presence. Wow, yeah. And a big reason that I wrote this book is that I feel like it's my job on the planet to help empower people to really be in their full body wisdom and body intelligence, so that each of us can do the work that we need to be doing in the world. Because the world needs all of us. It needs all of us doing what we can to help heal our planet. Absolutely. This is a very important time for all of us to really come into our strength. And we don't do that by beating up on ourselves and becoming, heavy disciplinarians. We do that by loving ourselves and making gentle moves toward having those lives that we love and deserve. And when you have that, you naturally want to live into your purpose, right? Yeah. Whether that purpose has to do with, your contribution to your neighborhood, or taking care of the kids in the neighborhood, or it has to do with running a giant corporation. It's still about, your purpose. Why are you here?
Yeah, that's huge because it's not only about health, right? It's not only about living a healthy lifestyle. It's making sure that we're healthy organisms so that we can do the things that we were kind of meant to do and come together. And you also say that finding purpose starts with our own bodies. It starts with listening to our deeper wisdom that is already there. This we don't really we're looking outside for all of these answers when really we kind of know if we pay attention, we know what direction to go into. So becoming healthier mentally and physically and being able to pay attention to our body also includes connecting with other human beings and community, which is not so much looked at. Community and these things like having a purpose and being involved in the community aren't really looked at as things that have such a direct impact on our health, but it really does, right? Having an aspect of community. So can you talk a little bit about that? Just the importance of having a larger impact and at least being active within the community and other people?
Yes. So, as a physician, I don't want to ignore anything that's really going to make a huge difference for my patients in terms of doing well. And a big piece of it is relationships with other people. So, the research on having people that you love or being a part of a community shows that it is more important to have those relationships or to be a part of a community than it is whether you smoke cigarettes or exercise. Wow. Those things, or even eat right? That love and connection with others has a healing impact on the body that is more important than any other lifestyle choice you're going to make. And that's why I have a whole chapter on it in Body-Wise, because it's exactly that important. I have a bunch of people in my practice who, I sometimes write prescriptions for, joining a sports club or, joining the bird watching group or going to church or temple or mosque or going on a date with their partner or getting a dog, right? And in all of those circumstances, what I'm after is I want that person to not feel alone. Yeah. And I want them to have their heart open and to be connected with another loving being, even if it's their dog, because even that's really good for you because it has a huge healing impact on the body. And people who have that are half as likely to have heart attacks, literally. But the heart, is yes, a pump and a physiologic pump in the body, but it has this metaphoric feel to it. And in fact, if you're depressed, you're twice as likely to have a heart attack. If you're lonely, you're twice as likely to have a heart attack. So these things really do matter quite a bit, as it turns out.
For sure. And depression is another one. It seems that's such a huge thing, and yet it's such a hard thing to figure out, depression, right? Why is it so hard to deal with? There doesn't seem to be, that's something that Western science, I think you actually said this, that Western science has had trouble getting to the bottom to, or has had trouble dealing with. So why has depression become such an issue?
Right. I think the reason Western science struggles is that depression is not just a neurotransmitter imbalance, and we used to think that, it's because you've got this either genetic or, induced imbalance in your neurotransmitters. And that turns out not, in fact, to be the case. Mm-hmm. That entire theory, which has driven psychiatry for the last couple of decades, looks to be not valid, which doesn't mean that neurotransmitters don't play their part, because they do. And it doesn't mean that I never use antidepressants, because I occasionally do. But they work short term. They don't work long term. And what works long term? Exercise, better than antidepressants, love, connection, community, healthy anti-inflammatory food, right? These are the cures for long-term depression. And I do want to say, 1 out of 4 females in the United States is on an antidepressant. Wow. That is just staggering. That's not a medical problem. That's a societal problem. Yeah. That is it's a perceptual problem, and the antidepressants don't even work long-term. And they don't work at all for mild to moderate depression. So I would say the majority of those women are incorrectly on antidepressants. Now, again, if you're taking one and it's saving your life, God bless. Please take it, right? I'm not telling you to go off of it, but you want to think about, because they do have a burnout quality over time, and they do change your neurotransmitters over time. And there are lots and lots and lots of ways to assist with depression. I use herbs, acupuncture, sometimes neurotransmitters, nutrients. A lot of people have mitochondrial dysfunction. That's one of the newer theories of depression that seems to really be emerging. Or brain inflammation, like high glutamate levels, low glutamine levels. And there are lots of things that can be done about those. Yeah. But I will tell you that the things that naturally help with all of those things are eating healthy food, exercising, loving and connecting with people, having a sense of purpose, right? All those fundamentals of health. And if we don't have those in alignment, the other stuff doesn't work so well.
Yeah. And not to say, I know you're not against drugs, you're not against these things, but you're so passionate about considering, making sure that we're considering the whole thing. And that's, there probably most of the time, if not always, there's a better solution, or there's a more personalized solution that can benefit us more in a direct way and more of a healthy way, and an energizing way that's better for us, and not just for our health, but just for everything in our lives, right? That's
right. And to really consider your life. I mean, many of us don't get to choose, what's happened. Maybe we've lost a child, or maybe, we've lost a spouse, or maybe we're in a recession and we've lost our job, stuff, or the house burned down. Bad things happen. Mm-hmm. We don't control the universe. We really don't control much at all, to be honest. But the things that you do have choice in, you want to think about, right? So if you're on an antidepressant because you're really miserable because you hate your job and your boss is a jerk,
no kidding,
then the antidepressant's fine, but you want to treat the problem, which is, finding another job, right? Finding a different way to honoring your needs and not just trying to suck it up and take a pill to cover it up.
Yeah.
And that's really what being body wise is about, is discerning. And you talked about it as a lifelong process, and I'm going to agree. I talk about it as learning the language of the body, right? And the first level is gathering information from other sources, data. The second level is sensation, feeling your body's sensations. The third level is feeling, what might those sensations mean? Like our patient with the gallbladder disease who only had it when she talked to her mother, right? Yep. So that sensation had an emotional quality to it. And then how do we discern what it means? Because it's not always obvious. I'm fairly good at this, and I'm a physician, for God's sakes. And it took me months to figure out that my headaches meant that I should leave my job, right? It wasn't straightforward. I went to physical therapy. I went to a chiropractor. I ended up with an osteopath, right? And I had someone else help me. So learning the language of the body takes time, just like learning any language. But the more you know, the more powerful you are at having the life that you want and dealing with bad things when they come your way, because they always do in everyone's life. We have this ridiculous assumption in the United States that everyone should be happy all the time and bad things should never happen. And that's just not human. It's not an earth life. What happens is that we all, ride over the path of life. And sometimes it's really hard and sometimes it's not hard. And that's the way it is. So learning how to be body intelligent, body wise in that process allows you to go through it so that those bad things, those traumas, which we were talking about before, actually serve to strengthen you and not to subdue you and make you less of who you are.
Jeez, yeah. That's awesome, because it's not it's an ongoing process, and what you're doing is you're giving us the tools to become more adaptable and self-reliant with our health, and just as human beings, tapping more into that, because that's how we're meant to be. Things change, and it's rough out here sometimes. So and it's something that we can become better at, and it's just knowing where to start. So, and I think it's a good place to start is developing a calm mind, right? So on a daily basis, like I just said, there's a lot of challenges that we come up against on a daily basis, just small, big, and just personal, external factors. So how would you say, where would be a good place to start, right? Just for anybody listening, or just for anybody that wants to just slow down and just start taking more control over their own body intelligence. What is the right mindset? Where can we start just on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Well, I usually suggest that, and I love meditation. I recommend it pretty much daily in my practice. And there's a lot of ways to meditate. Not everybody can sit and meditate. Some people are moving meditators. They need walking meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong or something, or yoga. It doesn't matter to me how you do your meditative practice, but some moment, like for me, when I wake up in the morning, I lie in bed And I basically listen to my body for just a minute, right? And then, and so I take a couple deep breaths. How am I feeling? What's going to go on in my day today? And then what's my intention for the day? Knowing what's coming, what do I need to get me to be respectful of where I'm at physically and to get me to where I want to go. So I would start with that, which is just basic listening, like, oh, I'm going to pee when I need to pee, or I'm going to eat when I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Or instead of having 3 cups of coffee, I'm going to sleep more tonight, right? Basic ways that we care for our body, and that our body learns to trust us to take care of it.
That's a great place to start for sure. Becoming more aware and just paying more attention to our lives instead of all of these other things that are begging for our attention. I love that. It's a good way to cap off. And just you mentioned one thing too that I want to touch briefly on, is that because you just mentioned eating, which is another topic. This is a whole thing. Obviously, we could have a whole other podcast about this, but you talk about eating what, like, if my body was to choose what we were going to eat, what would it choose? Or what would, like, it's kind of interesting there, because we feel like this is what I want to eat, but then it's not working out so good for us. So how do we make that differentiation when it's our body? What's the difference between our body and our minds telling us those decisions, like what we should be eating?
Right. Well, that's the discernment part, right? So there's no use pretending that's not a little bit complicated, right? Because if I am, I just played volleyball this morning and I was starving when I got home, right? And if I indulged if on the way home somebody was on the side of the road with, I don't know, fresh baked muffins and sticking them in the window of my car, would my body have been saying yes, please?
Yeah.
Yes, it would have. It would have said yes, please, right? Yeah. And it takes me going, okay, no, yes, you need food. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to take you home. So it's this beautiful relationship between the mind and the body, right? Where we feed the body what it needs. I always think about how, we go to the store and buy pet food with exactly the nutrients that the dog needs or the cat needs. And we're not feeding them, things they shouldn't have, like corn or, bad things. But do we do that with ourselves?
Yeah.
Not so much, right?
Not so much.
So, eating is for nourishment. Eating is for nourishment. So how can you best nourish your body? Which doesn't mean you never eat chocolate cake. I'm not an extremist. I do think that it's okay to do that sometimes, but to really listen to what's going to make you feel good, what's going to give you energy, what's going to help you have, the kind of concentration that you want today, what's going to give you enough calories to function. That's what we're after.
Cool. Exactly. And just the implication that can make is just that small change, eating just like you said, like, I'm still going to have my chocolate cake tonight, but maybe right now I'm going to have a mango or like an avocado or an apple. I like to do that. It's kind of an interesting test that ends up having such a dramatic impact on the rest of your day. And it's it's very cool. All right. So this has been such an awesome conversation. I had so much fun reading your book, and it serves so many purposes. It's such a personal book. It's such a guide. It's such a toolbox, and it's such an amazing reference. So just one more question I just want to ask you. I'm curious to get your answer. Is every once in a while I like to ask people this, but bringing it down to a very simple form, what is working with so many people over the past couple of decades and interacting and learning more about yourself? What is there one thing you know for sure, just about being happy as a person and as a human being?
I would say it really is listening deeply to your own body. And I say body, but keeping in mind that our body and our mind and our spirit are really all one thing, right? But and this is something that I'm now turning 50 this year, and I would say this is my most important development over the last decade, is trusting myself to take care of myself. Like, meaning that no matter what happens, because life is unpredictable, but no matter what happens, I'm going to choose to care for myself in that circumstance, right? Whether I'm, lost in the middle of the desert and I have to figure out how to get home, or I'm getting, I don't know, too many offers for wonderful things to do and it's going to make me crazy, or, whatever it is, that I trust myself in those circumstances to take care of myself to the best of my ability. And I think that is a really powerful stance, because if you trust yourself to take care of yourself to the best of your ability, then there's nothing to be afraid of, right? Doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, but it means you're going to navigate it with your body wisdom and your body intelligence as best you can. And there are lots of things we don't control, but we're never going to control them. That is a fallacy. This allows us, makes me think of Viktor Frankl, right? Which is the only thing you have choice about is what is in your own mind, your own intention. And if you really own yourself, if you have integrity with yourself in that way, then you're unstoppable and you're also at peace.
That's great. Thanks so much. That's really powerful. That's awesome. Yeah. So once again, I just thanks so much for spending time with me today, and having just going deep into some of these topics. I really had so much fun, and I'm always having fun learning about you, and just the message that you come with. You come with so much energy. I don't know where you get it from, but you come with such an amazing energy, and just the way you speak is very exciting. So what are you excited about right now? What kind of stuff are you working on right now, and what's kind of going on in your life professionally, or what's?
Yeah, I've got a couple big conferences coming up. If anyone is interested, my website, drrachel.com. It's all spelled out, DOCTOR, Rachel.com. I'm doing some speaking all over the place. I'm going to be in Europe this summer, actually launching my book in Spain, awesome. France, the UK. That's pretty exciting too. So, and then I'm launching my children. That's the other thing.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm going to be an empty nester this year. So Lord knows what I'm going to do now that I'm really freed up. It'll be interesting.
A new phase, maybe another book, another. No, yeah, exactly. All right. So that's great. So I really appreciate your time, Rachel. It's been so fun learning about you, and just staying in touch with the work you're doing, because it's really amazing. It has such an awesome impact, and the way that you bring this message really does have an impact, because you're resonating with us on the ground level, at a human level, and you're helping us turn inwards to learn more about ourselves. So I commend you for that, and I really thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. A pleasure.
Cool.